The smell of smoke and blood hung thick in the winter air. Anna Coulter crawled through the wreckage of what had once been a line cabin on the northern edge of her property, her fingers numb against the frozen earth, her breath coming in ragged clouds that dissolved into the Montana darkness. 7 days. It had taken 7 days for everything to burn. She pressed her palm against a still warm timber, steadying herself as she rose to her knees. The rifle she carried had a cracked stock and a barrel bent from impact, useless now except as a club. Blood trickled from a gash along her cheekbone, mixing with the ash that coated her skin like war paint. Through the shattered window frame she could see them. 5 bodies lay motionless in the snow, dark shapes against white ground, their blood already freezing into crimson ice. The moon hung full and cold above the mountains, casting everything in silver and shadow. They had come for her land. They had come believing she was weak, broken, alone. They had died learning otherwise. Anna's voice, when she finally spoke into the silence, carried no triumph, only a bone-deep weariness that came from understanding what she had become. "They asked me if I had regrets," she whispered to the dead men and the uncaring sky. "Regret for not running, for not selling, for not choosing the easier path." She stood, her legs trembling from exhaustion and cold and the aftermath of violence. Her hand found the silver wedding band she still wore, turning it once, twice, 3 times around her finger. A habit, a prayer, a goodbye. "I told them I only regret one thing, that I didn't kill them sooner." The wind rose, carrying her words away into the vast wilderness that stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere in that darkness lay Bridger's Hollow, the town that had tried to swallow her whole. Somewhere out there, the man responsible for all of this was still breathing. Not for much longer. Anna turned her back on the cabin and began the long walk home through the snow, leaving footprints that would be covered by dawn, erasing all evidence that she had ever been there at all, like a ghost. The screen went black. White letters appeared against the darkness. 7 days earlier, Bridger's Hollow, Montana, November 1889. Morning came to the Coulter Ranch the way it always did, with the sun climbing slow and reluctant over the eastern peaks, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of gold and amber that promised warmth but delivered only light. Anna Coulter stood in that light, a shovel in her hands, digging into earth that had frozen solid overnight. The grave was already 3 feet deep. She drove the blade down again, feeling the impact jar through her shoulders, her back settling somewhere in her chest, where grief lived like a second heart. The pile of dirt beside the hole grew slowly, each shovelful a small victory against the stubborn ground. She was 47 years old. She had been a widow for 6 months. She was digging a grave for a man whose name she did not yet know. The sound of hoofbeats broke through her concentration. Anna paused, wiping sweat from her forehead, despite the cold, and turned to watch Reverend Josiah Hale dismount from his bay mare, with the careful movements of a man who had spent more years in the saddle than he cared to admit. He was 55, white-haired and soft-spoken, with the kind of gentle face that made people trust him instantly. Anna had known him for 12 years. He had married her to Thomas. He had buried Thomas 6 months ago. He was one of the few people in Bridger's Hollow she still considered a friend. "Anna," he said, his voice carrying concern and confusion in equal measure, "what are you doing?" She didn't stop working. The shovel bit into dirt and stone, the rhythm steady as a heartbeat. "Digging a grave." Josiah looked around the small cemetery plot behind the house where Thomas Coulter's headstone stood alone beneath a cottonwood tree. No coffin waited. No body lay in preparation. Just Anna and her shovel and a hole that kept getting deeper. For whom? Anna stopped. She looked at him with eyes that held something the Reverend had never seen there before. Not quite madness, not quite rage. Something colder and more deliberate. "For whoever killed my husband." The words hung between them like smoke. Josiah's face went pale. "Anna, you know what Sheriff Watson concluded. The investigation found that Thomas died in an accident. His horse spooked near Eagle's Cliff, and he fell. It was tragic, but it was not murder." "The horse was 15 years old," Anna said quietly. "She'd carried Thomas over that trail 1,000 times. She didn't spook. Even the gentlest animal can be startled by a sudden sound. There were marks on the saddle girth. Someone cut it halfway through. There were bruises on Thomas's arms that didn't come from falling. He fought someone before he went over that cliff. Josiah stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. Anna, grief can make us see things that aren't there. It can make us search for meaning in random tragedy. I've seen it before in others who've lost loved ones. The mind creates patterns, conspiracies, anything, to avoid accepting that sometimes death is simply an accident of fate. Anna drove the shovel into the ground one more time, then left it standing there like a marker. She faced the Reverend fully. Sheriff Watson is currently trying to buy my land. He's made 3 offers in the last 2 months, each one higher than the last. Does that seem like normal behavior to you? A lawman who investigates a death on a property and then immediately tries to purchase that same property from the widow. The Reverend had no answer for that. His silence was confirmation enough. Anna picked up her coat from where it lay folded on Thomas's headstone, shrugging it on against the cold that was beginning to seep through her work-dampened clothes. I'm going into town. When I come back, I'll finish digging. She left him standing there among the graves, both the filled one and the empty one, and walked toward the house where her son was packing to leave her. Inside the ranch house, Lucas Coulter moved through his bedroom with the methodical efficiency of someone who had been planning this departure for longer than he was willing to admit. He was 21 tall like his father had been, with his mother's dark hair and his father's steady hands. Those hands folded shirts and pants into a canvas travel bag with careful precision. Anna stood in the doorway watching him. She did not announce herself. She simply waited until he sensed her presence and turned, startled. "Ma, I didn't hear you come in. Where are you going?" Lucas set down the shirt he'd been folding. His jaw tightened the way it always did when he was about to say something he knew would hurt her. "Denver, there's a job at the mining company. Survey work. It pays well." "Leaving me alone?" It wasn't a question. Lucas heard the weight behind the words anyway. "You told me you didn't need me. You said I shouldn't feel obligated to stay and work a ranch I never wanted. I said that so you wouldn't feel guilty about wanting to leave. I didn't say I wanted you to go." The distinction hung between them like a chasm. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding into his voice. "What do you want, Ma? You want me to stay, or do you want me to help?" Anna stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less intense. "Those are different things. Completely different. One means I stay here like a child doing chores and pretending everything's normal. The other means I fight alongside you like a man, like Pa would have wanted." Something shifted in Anna's expression. Lucas saw it, that flicker of surprise that meant he'd touched on something true. "You want to know what really happened to your father? Do you have the truth to tell me?" Anna didn't answer immediately. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper worn soft from being opened and closed too many times. She held it out to her son. Lucas took it. The paper was cheap, the kind sold at any general store. The handwriting was crude, printed in thick pencil strokes that suggested either illiteracy or deliberate disguise. "You have 7 days to leave Bridger's Hollow. If you do not, Lucas will be next." The blood drained from Lucas's face. His hands, those steady hands that had been folding clothes moments before, began to shake. "When did you get this?" 3 days ago. Slipped under the door while we were both sleeping. "And you didn't tell me didn't go to the sheriff?" Anna's laugh was bitter and short. "The sheriff is the one trying to buy our land, Lucas. The sheriff was the one who declared your father's death an accident without any real investigation. The sheriff is part of this, whatever this is." Lucas read the letter again, as if repetition might change its meaning. When he looked up at his mother, she saw fear in his eyes. Yes, but also something else, something harder. "So what do? We find out who sent this. We find out who killed your father, and we make them understand that the Coulter family does not scare easily." The words should have sounded brave. Instead, they sounded tired. Anna was so very tired. Lucas set his travel bag aside. Whatever plans he'd had for Denver could wait. Some debts needed paying first. The ride into Bridger's Hollow took an hour through country that changed with each passing season, but remained fundamentally itself vast, indifferent, beautiful in a way that broke the heart. Anna knew every mile of it. She had ridden this trail for 12 years, ever since the day she and Thomas had arrived with nothing but 2 horses, a wagon, and dreams of building something permanent. They had built it. Now someone wanted to take it away. The town appeared gradually, first as smoke from chimneys, then as the scattered buildings that marked civilization's tenuous grip on the wilderness. Bridger's Hollow had started as a mining camp 20 years earlier and grown into something more substantial when the veins of silver played out and people discovered that cattle and timber could sustain a community just as well as precious metal. 300 souls called it home now. Most of them wanted the railroad to come through. Most of them saw Anna Coulter's 3,000 acres as the only obstacle standing between them and prosperity. Anna could feel their eyes on her as she rode down Main Street. The usual nods and greetings that had once accompanied her visits to town had dried up over the past months, replaced by sidelong glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she came too close. She dismounted outside the general store and tied her horse to the rail. The animal stamped nervously, sensing something in the air that Anna felt too. Attention, a waiting. Inside, Margaret Yates looked up from behind the counter with an expression that cycled rapidly through surprise, fear, and forced pleasantness before settling on something like resigned courtesy. "Mrs. Coulter, I have your order prepared." Anna stopped halfway to the counter. "I didn't place an order." Margaret's hands fluttered nervously among the packages wrapped in brown paper that sat waiting. "Oh, I assumed you would need supplies, so I took the liberty of—" She trailed off, unable to finish the lie. Anna understood then. Margaret had prepared an order because someone had told her to. Someone who wanted Anna supplied and ready to leave town. Someone who was paying attention to her movements. In the corner of the store, 3 men in work clothes sat on barrels drinking coffee and watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Anna recognized them as railroad workers, part of the survey crew that had been in town for the past month, mapping routes and tallying costs. One of them spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's her, the woman holding up progress." Another laughed. "One woman, sitting on 3,000 acres, while 200 men need jobs." Anna didn't turn around. She placed her hands flat on the counter and kept her voice level. "I'll take salt coffee and ammunition. Nothing I didn't order." Margaret moved to fill the request with shaking hands. The railroad workers continued their commentary. "Selfish, if you ask me. Her husband's dead. What's she need all that land for anyway?" Anna's fingers curled into fists. She forced them open again. Margaret wrapped the supplies in silence and named a price. Anna paid exact change and turned to leave. The youngest of the railroad workers, emboldened by whiskey or stupidity or both, stood up as she passed. "My wife and kids are living in a tent, lady. You got any idea what that's like? Waiting for work that won't come because one stubborn woman won't sell." Anna stopped. She looked at him with eyes that had seen harder men than him break under less pressure. "I know what it's like to lose a husband. Do you know what it's like to lose everything you built with your own hands?" She didn't wait for an answer. The silence she left behind was answer enough. The sheriff's office sat at the far end of Main Street, a squat building made of logs and determination. Anna found the door unlocked, which surprised her. Sheriff Marcus Watson was many things, but careless wasn't usually one of them. She pushed inside and stopped. The office was empty, but the desk was not. Spread across its scarred surface lay a county map with the Coulter Ranch circled in red ink. Beside it sat a purchase agreement, official-looking, with its typed text and blank signature lines. The price listed was $5,000. At the bottom, in Watson's distinctive scrawl, was a note, "Final offer. Take it or face consequences." Anna was reading this when she heard the voice behind her. "Looking for something, Mrs. Coulter." She turned to find Sheriff Marcus Watson filling the doorway with his considerable bulk. He was 50 years old, 240 pounds, with a beard that reached his chest and eyes that missed nothing. He wore his star like he'd earned it, though Anna knew he'd been appointed by the territorial governor after the last sheriff died under circumstances nobody discussed. "I'm looking for the man who killed my husband." Watson closed the door behind him with deliberate slowness. When he spoke, his voice carried more amusement than concern. We've had this conversation before, Mrs. Coulter. Your husband died in an accident. My investigation was thorough. The territorial marshal reviewed my findings and agreed there's nothing more to discuss. Your investigation took 3 days. You never interviewed anyone who might have seen Thomas that morning. You never examined the saddle girth that I told you was cut. You called it an accident and closed the case before his body was cold. Watson moved to his desk, gathering up the map and purchase agreement with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their size. I examined everything that needed examining. I'm sorry the results weren't what you wanted to hear, but grief doesn't change facts. Anna stepped closer, and for just a moment Watson's hand moved toward his gun belt. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. You're trying to buy my land. You've made 3 offers in 2 months. That's not the behavior of an impartial lawman. That's the behavior of a businessman who sees an opportunity. There's no law against making an offer. There is law against making false accusations against a peace officer. Is there law against murder? The temperature in the room dropped. Watson's affable expression hardened into something colder. Be very careful with your next words, Mrs. Coulter. Or what? You'll kill me too. Make it look like another accident. Watson set down the papers and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. I heard you received a threatening letter. About your son. That must be very frightening for a widow alone on a big ranch with no protection. Anna felt ice slide down her spine. She had told no one about the letter except Lucas. No one. How did you know about that? Watson smiled, and the smile contained no warmth at all. Bridger's Hollow is a small town, Mrs. Coulter. Everyone knows everyone's business. It's part of living in a community. Maybe that's something you should consider when you make decisions that affect everyone's future. He picked up the purchase agreement again, holding it out to her. $5,000. A new start somewhere safe. No more worries about threatening letters or accidents. Seems like a fair trade to me. Anna looked at the paper but didn't take it. Or I could stay. Find out who's threatening my family. Make them regret it. Watson's laugh was genuine this time. You think you're some kind of detective? You're a rancher's widow who's in over her head. Take the money, Mrs. Coulter, while you still can. Anna turned to leave, then paused at the door. My husband once told me something, Sheriff. He said the most dangerous person in any situation is the one with nothing left to lose. I'm a widow. My husband is dead. Someone's threatening my son. What exactly do I have left to lose? She left him standing there, and though she didn't see it, Watson's smile finally faded into something that might have been concern. Anna didn't go home. Not yet. There was one more stop to make, one more piece of information to gather. She tied her horse outside the saloon, a building that decent women never entered and that Anna had never visited in all her years in Bridger's Hollow. She entered anyway. Conversations died as she pushed through the doors. 20 men turned to stare at the widow in their midst scandal, and surprise written equally across their faces. The bartender, a man named Silas Hetch, who'd been pouring drinks in this town since before it had a name, actually took a step backward. Anna walked to the bar and placed both hands on its surface. Whiskey. Silas didn't move. Mrs. Coulter, I don't care what you think. Pour. He poured. Anna drank it in one swallow, the burn a welcome distraction from everything else burning inside her. She set the glass down hard enough to make it ring. In the corner of the room, partially hidden by shadow and tobacco smoke, a man sat alone at a table. He was perhaps 45, dressed in black from his coat to his boots, with eyes that seemed to catch what little light filtered through the dirty windows and hold it. He had been watching Anna from the moment she walked in. Now he stood and crossed the room with the careful grace of someone who knew how to move through a crowd without drawing attention. When he reached the bar, he stood close enough that only Anna could hear him. Mrs. Coulter, may I have a moment? Anna turned to face him fully. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weathering that came from years outdoors, the careful stillness of a man who had learned to wait. That depends on who you are and what you want. He reached into his coat slowly, giving her time to react if she chose to. What he pulled out was a card which he placed on the bar between them. Nathan Graves, United States Marshal, Denver office. Anna picked up the card, studying it, then studying the man who'd given it to her. You're a long way from Denver Marshal. I came because of Thomas. Every muscle in Anna's body went tight. You knew my husband. No, but I know who killed him. The saloon continued its business around them, but for Anna everything else fell away. There was only this moment, this man, this impossible claim. You know who killed Thomas? Nathan Graves glanced around the room, noting the curious stares and listening ears. Not here. Come to your ranch tonight. Midnight, alone. Why should I trust you? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because if you don't tomorrow, your son dies, just like Thomas did. Before Anna could respond, he was gone, moving through the crowd with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown, disappearing out the back door before anyone could mark his passage. Anna stood frozen at the bar, her mind racing through possibilities and dangers and the terrible hope that maybe finally someone could give her answers. She paid Silas for the drink she'd barely tasted and walked back out into the afternoon light, where her horse waited patiently and the world continued pretending everything was normal. The ride home gave Anna too much time to think about Nathan Graves and his impossible knowledge, about the letter threatening Lucas, about Thomas and the secrets he might have kept, about the map on Watson's desk and Margaret Yates's nervous hands and Reverend Hale's two gentle questions, about the grave she'd been digging that morning, waiting for a body that didn't exist yet. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Anna had been capable of seeing beauty anymore. Lucas met her at the door, concern written across his face. You were gone a long time. I needed to think. She moved past him into the house that still smelled like Thomas, even after 6 months. His coat still hung by the door. His boots still sat beneath the bench. His coffee mug still waited on the shelf unused, but not discarded. Anna had been unable to change anything. Moving his things would mean accepting he was gone. She wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready. Ma, we need to talk about the letter, about what we're going to do. I know what we're going to do, Anna said. We're going to find who sent it. And we're going to make them sorry they ever thought the Coulters were easy targets. Lucas followed her as she walked through the house to the bedroom she had once shared with Thomas and had slept alone in for half a year. She stood in the doorway, staring at the bed that was too big for one person, the emptiness that seemed to grow larger every day. I'm going to need you to do something for me, she said without turning around. Something difficult. Anything. Go upstairs. Lock your door. Don't come out until morning, no matter what you hear. Lucas's voice went sharp with alarm. What are you planning? I'm planning to get answers. Now go. He hesitated, but something in his mother's tone convinced him this was not an argument he would win. He climbed the stairs slowly, looking back twice before finally disappearing into his room. Anna heard the lock click. Only then did she enter the bedroom. She knelt beside the bed and pulled out a wooden chest that had been shoved far back under the frame, hidden from casual sight. The lock was heavy and intricate. Anna didn't have a key. She picked up Thomas's old rifle from where it leaned in the corner and used the butt to smash the lock. It took 3 blows before the mechanism gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. Inside the chest lay things Anna had never seen before. A map, old and hand-drawn, showing the Coulter property with markings and notes in Thomas's careful handwriting. Circled in red was an area marked North Ridge with a single word written beside it, gold. Beneath the map was a letter, the ink still dark, the paper only slightly yellowed. Anna's hands shook as she unfolded it. Anna, if you're reading this, I'm dead. I'm sorry for keeping secrets. The land isn't just a ranch. Under North Ridge, there's gold more than you can imagine. I was going to tell you when Lucas was older, but I think they found out. Don't trust Sheriff Watson. Don't trust Reverend Hale. Don't trust anyone in town. There's one person you can trust, Nathan Graves. If I die, he'll come to you. He'll help. I love you. I always have. I always will. Thomas. Anna read the letter 3 times each reading, revealing new layers of deception and protection, love and fear. Thomas had known. He'd known he was in danger. He'd known about the gold. He'd arranged for help to come after he was gone. He'd died trying to protect her from this knowledge, and in doing so had left her defenseless. She was still sitting there, the letter clutched in her hands when she heard the knock. Midnight had come without her noticing. She rose, tucked the letter into her pocket, and picked up the rifle. When she opened the door, Nathan Graves stood on her porch exactly as he'd promised. "You read Thomas's letter." It wasn't a question. Anna stepped aside to let him enter. In the kitchen, she made coffee while Nathan sat at the table, his hat in his hands, his eyes taking in every detail of the house. When she set a cup in front of him, he nodded his thanks. "Thomas wrote to me 7 months ago," Nathan began. "He said he'd discovered a conspiracy. Sheriff Watson, Reverend Hale, and a third person he couldn't identify were planning to take his land. He asked me to investigate." "Why you?" "Because I owed him a debt. Years ago, before he settled here, Thomas saved my life during a blizzard outside Cheyenne. He found me half frozen and brought me back. Stayed with me for 3 days until I could ride again. I told him if he ever needed anything, all he had to do was ask." Nathan took a sip of coffee, his eyes distant with memory. "He asked me to look into Watson and Hale. I did. Both of them are clean on paper, but money moves through this town in strange ways. Someone with power in Denver is backing them. Someone with enough influence to make investigations disappear. Who? I don't know yet. That's what I'm here to find out." Anna sat down across from him, the weight of the day finally catching up with her. She was so tired. Tired of being strong, tired of being alone, tired of pretending she had any idea what she was doing. "Thomas told you about me, about before we were married." Nathan nodded slowly. "He said you weren't always a rancher's wife, that you had a past you'd left behind. He didn't give details, just said that if the day ever came when you had to fight, I shouldn't be surprised by what I saw." For a long moment Anna was silent. Then she stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness that pressed against the glass. "I was 17 when I left home, ran away from a father who drank, and a future that looked like a cage. I made my way west, doing whatever work I could find. For a while that meant tracking. I was good at it. Good enough that the Army hired me as a scout during the Apache campaigns." She turned to face Nathan, and in the lamplight, her face looked harder, older, carved from something that wouldn't break. "I spent 3 years in the desert reading sign, finding water, keeping soldiers alive. They called me Ghost because I could move through hostile territory without being seen. I could track anything that left a mark. And when necessary, I could kill." Nathan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, understanding maybe, or recognition. "Thomas met me at Fort Bowie. He was a supply sergeant. I was returning from a patrol. We talked all night. 3 months later, we were married. He asked me to leave the Army to start fresh, somewhere peaceful. I said yes because I was tired of death. I wanted life instead. And now," Anna's smile was bitter, "now life has found death anyway. Turns out you can't outrun what you are. You can only pretend for a while." Before Nathan could respond, something hit the window. Both of them went for their weapons, but what came through the glass wasn't a bullet. It was a rock. Wrapped around the rock was a piece of paper. 6 days. Don't trust the marshal. He works for us. Anna and Nathan looked at each other, calculating, measuring, trying to decide if this was truth or manipulation. "Either this letter is lying," Anna said slowly, "or you've been lying to me." Nathan stood, his hand resting on his gun. "Or they want us to distrust each other, divide us, make us weak." A gunshot cracked through the night. Both of them ran to the door, weapons drawn, bursting out onto the porch. At the gate to the property, a rider on a black horse wheeled and disappeared into the darkness, too far for a clear shot, too fast to follow on foot, but they'd left something behind. Anna ran toward the gate, her boots crunching in the frozen snow. Nathan followed, shouting for her to wait, to be careful, but she didn't listen. Margaret Yates lay dead in the snow, her eyes still open, a neat hole in her chest. The woman who had been kind to Anna, who had tried to help in her small way, who had prepared an order she hadn't been asked to fill. Pinned to her coat was another note. "This is what happens to those who help Mrs. Coulter. 5 days." Anna knelt in the snow beside the body, her hands shaking, rage and grief warring inside her chest. She had brought this, her stubbornness, her refusal to leave, her determination to find justice. Margaret had died because of her. Nathan knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "This isn't your fault, isn't it? No, this is the fault of whoever pulled that trigger. Whoever is so desperate to have your land that they'll kill innocent people. That guilt belongs to them, not you. Anna stood, her jaw set, her eyes dry. There would be time for tears later. Right now there was only clarity. Then I'll give them what they want. Nathan's eyes widened. You'll sell? No, I'll give them a war. She turned to look at him fully, and what he saw in her face made him take an involuntary step backward. This was not the widow who had served him coffee. This was not the rancher's wife who had been pretending to be weak. This was the ghost, the tracker who had survived the Apache wars, the woman Thomas Coulter had fallen in love with and tried to protect by asking her to bury that part of herself. Anna Coulter was done burying things. 5 days, she said quietly. We have 5 days to find who's doing this and make them pay. Are you with me, Marshal? Nathan looked at the dead woman in the snow, at the note pinned to her coat, at the tracks leading away into darkness. He looked at Anna Coulter, at the transformation he'd just witnessed, at the promise of violence and justice combined. He'd come to Bridger's Hollow to honor a debt to a dead man. He was staying for something else now, something that looked like righteousness but felt like revenge. I'm with you. Somewhere in town, in a room with the curtains drawn, 3 people sat around a table. Sheriff Marcus Watson shuffled papers. Reverend Josiah Hale poured whiskey with steady hands. And the third-person face, hidden in shadow, spoke with a voice that carried absolute certainty. Margaret Yates is dead. That should frighten Anna Coulter into leaving. Hale swirled his whiskey but didn't drink. Or it will make her angry. Anna is not like other women. Fear doesn't control her the way it should. Watson laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Doesn't matter. She's one woman with a boy barely grown. 5 days from now, the land will be ours. The railroad will come through. The gold will be ours to mine. And Anna Coulter will be dead. The third person leaned forward, and lamplight caught their face for just a moment. Just long enough to reveal features that would have shocked anyone who knew them. Make sure of it. I've waited too long for this. I won't wait any more. The scene faded to black, leaving only the sound of whiskey being poured and plans being made, and a town sleeping uneasily under stars that saw everything and forgave nothing. 5 days until the earth stood still. 5 days until Anna Coulter reminded them all what happens when you back a ghost into a corner. 5 days until blood paid for blood. The funeral had only just begun. Dawn came cold and unforgiving on the 3rd day. Anna Coulter stood in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she had once cooked breakfast for a husband who would never eat again, and studied the map spread across the table. Nathan Graves stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the pre-dawn chill, far enough that propriety remained intact. Margaret Yates had been buried the night before in a quiet ceremony attended by only a handful of people brave enough to show their faces. The rest of Bridger's Hollow had stayed away either from fear or indifference, or the calculation that supporting Anna Coulter had become too expensive. Lucas had not come downstairs yet. Anna could hear him moving in his room above the careful footsteps of someone who had not slept, who had spent the night listening to his mother, and a stranger planned something he was not part of. That would change today. The gold, Nathan said, tapping the map where Thomas had marked North Ridge in red ink. That's what this is about. Everything else is just noise. Anna shook her head. It's not about gold, it's about control. Whoever is behind this wants the land, because the railroad will come through here. The gold is a bonus, but the real prize is the route. Control the route, and you control commerce for the entire territory. Nathan looked at her with new appreciation. Thomas said you were smart. Thomas said a lot of things he never told me to my face. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. 6 months of widowhood had not dulled the edge of betrayal she felt knowing her husband had kept secrets, had died with secrets, had arranged for another man to protect her because he had not trusted her enough to protect herself. Nathan seemed to hear what she was not saying. He loved you. Everything he did was to keep you safe. I don't need safety. I need truth. She rolled up the map and moved to the stove where coffee had been boiling too long, turning bitter and dark. She poured 2 cups and handed one to Nathan. Their fingers brushed in the exchange. Neither of them pulled away immediately. Today we go into town, Anna said. We talk to people. We find out who the third person is, Watson and Hale are part of this, but they're taking orders. Someone with real power is pulling strings. And if we get caught asking questions, Anna's smile was cold. Then we find out how much they're willing to lose to keep their secrets. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Lucas appeared dressed and ready, his jaw set with determination that reminded Anna painfully of Thomas. "I'm coming with you." "No. I'm not asking permission, Ma. Margaret died because of us. Because someone wants our land and is willing to kill for it. I have a right to help stop them." Anna wanted to argue, wanted to send him back upstairs, wanted to keep him safe the way Thomas had tried to keep her safe. But looking at her son, she saw a man who would not be protected anymore, who had crossed some invisible line in the night and could not be sent back. "You do exactly what I tell you. No questions, no arguments. Understood." Lucas nodded. Nathan cleared his throat. "If he's coming, he needs to know what we're walking into. This isn't a game, son. People have died. More will die before this ends." "I know," Lucas said quietly. "I also know my father died because he tried to handle this alone. Maybe if he'd trusted people, trusted Ma, he'd still be alive." The words hit Anna like a physical blow. Her son saw it too, saw that Thomas's desire to protect had become its own kind of betrayal. "Then we work together," Anna said. "All three of us. No more secrets." She looked at Nathan when she said it, and he nodded his agreement. What she did not say, what she kept locked behind her teeth, was the deeper truth. That working together meant trusting each other. And trust was something Anna Coulter had very little of left to give. Bridger's Hollow looked different in the morning light of the third day. The town had always been rough around the edges, a collection of buildings thrown up quickly and maintained poorly, but now it seemed to crouch against the mountains like something waiting to spring. Anna felt eyes watching from windows as she rode down Main Street with Nathan on one side and Lucas on the other. They stopped first at the land office, a small building that smelled of dust and old paper and the slow corruption of bureaucracy. The clerk, a nervous man named Pemberton, with ink-stained fingers, looked up from his ledgers with the expression of someone who had been expecting trouble and was disappointed to receive it so early in the day. "Mrs. Coulter, Marshal Graves, what can I do for you?" Nathan placed both hands on the counter, his badge catching the light. "We need to see all recent filings related to the Coulter property. Sales liens, survey requests, everything." Pemberton's face went pale. "I don't know if I have the authority to—" "You have the authority because I'm a federal marshal asking. Would you like me to make it an official request that would require paperwork? Lots of paperwork, the kind that draws attention from Denver." The threat was clear. Pemberton swallowed hard and nodded. "Give me a moment." He disappeared into the back room. Anna used the time to study the maps on the wall, the territorial surveys that showed how Bridger's Hollow sat at a crucial junction between the eastern plains and the mountain passes. Any railroad coming through would need to cross Coulter land. There was no other route that made economic sense. Lucas stood by the window watching the street. His hand rested near his hip where he had taken to carrying his father's old revolver. Anna had taught him to shoot when he was 12. She wondered now if that had been preparation or curse. Pemberton returned with an armful of documents, which he spread across the counter with shaking hands. "This is everything filed in the last year." Nathan began sorting through papers while Anna watched Pemberton's face. The clerk was sweating despite the cold, his eyes darting between the three of them and the door, calculating escape routes. "Mr. Pemberton," Anna said softly, "how much did they pay you?" "I don't know what you mean." "To file false documents, to backdate surveys, to create the legal framework for stealing my land. How much was your integrity worth?" Pemberton's face crumbled. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for too long and was desperate to set it down. $300. They said it was just paperwork, that you were going to sell anyway, that I was just making the process smoother." "Who paid you?" "I don't know his name. Sheriff Watson brought him, said he was from Denver, that he had authorization from the territorial government." Nathan looked up from the papers. "What did he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed, expensive clothes. He had a ring on his right hand, gold with a black stone, and a scar here." Pemberton touched his left eyebrow, indicating a mark. Anna and Nathan exchanged glances. Neither of them recognized the description, but it was more than they had before. A face, a detail, something to chase. Did Watson or Hale ever mention his name? Anything at all? Pemberton thought hard, his fingers drumming nervously on the counter. Once. I heard Watson call him by name when they thought I was in the back room. He said, Governor. The word hung in the air like smoke. Governor, Nathan repeated. Not the governor, just governor as a name. That's what I heard. But I don't know if it was a name or a title or... I'm sorry, that's all I know. Anna reached across the counter and placed her hand over Pemberton's trembling fingers. Thank you. You just saved your life. They left him there pale and shaking and stepped back out into the street where the sun was climbing higher and the day was getting colder. Lucas spoke first. A governor. Someone that powerful is behind this, or someone who uses that as a nickname, Nathan said. Someone with political connections. Someone who could make investigations disappear. Anna looked down the street toward the church where Reverend Hale would be preparing for the day's work, comforting the sick, counseling the troubled, plotting murder. We need to split up, she said. Nathan, take Lucas and watch Sheriff Watson. See where he goes, who he talks to. I'll handle Reverend Hale. You shouldn't go alone, Nathan protested. I won't be alone. I'll be in a church. Even killers hesitate in the house of God. She said it with more confidence than she felt, but Nathan seemed convinced. Or perhaps he simply recognized the futility of arguing with her when her mind was set. 2 hours, he said. We meet back at the general store. If anyone doesn't show, the others come looking. Anna nodded and watched them right away, Nathan and Lucas side by side, before she turned her horse toward the white steeple that rose above the other buildings like an accusation. The church was empty when Anna entered, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Sunlight filtered through plain windows, creating patterns of light and shadow that moved as clouds passed overhead. The altar stood bare except for a simple cross, and the pews smelled of old wood and older prayers. Reverend Josiah Hale knelt before the altar, his white hair catching the light, his hands clasped in what appeared to be genuine devotion. He did not turn when Anna entered, but she saw his shoulders tighten, recognized awareness in the way he held himself. Mrs. Coulter, I thought you might come. Did you pray for Margaret Yates this morning? Reverend, did you ask God to forgive the men who killed her? Hale stood slowly, his knees protesting after too long on the hard floor. When he turned to face her, his expression was sorrowful but not surprised. I pray for everyone in this town, Anna, the living and the dead, the righteous and the sinful. That's my calling. Is murder part of your calling too? The words should have shocked him. Instead, Hale simply sighed and walked to the nearest pew, sitting down heavily. He gestured for Anna to join him, but she remained standing. You think I had something to do with Margaret's death. I think you're part of whatever is happening. I think you and Watson and someone else are trying to steal my land. I think Thomas knew, and that's why he died. Hale was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke again, his voice carried something Anna had never heard from him before. Regret. Your husband was a good man, Anna, one of the best I've known. When he came to me 6 months ago, when he told me what he'd discovered, I tried to warn him. I told him to take you and Lucas and leave, to forget what he'd seen and start over somewhere safe. Anna felt her heart hammering against her ribs. You knew someone was going to kill him, and you did nothing. I did what I could. I went to the territorial marshal. I wrote letters. I made noise. But the people behind this, they have power I can't fight. They made it very clear that if I continued to interfere, I would end up like Thomas. So you chose to live. I chose to survive. There's a difference. Anna moved closer, her shadow falling across the Reverend's face. Tell me who they are. Give me names. Hale looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much and saved too little. Sheriff Watson is the local muscle. He does what he's told and doesn't ask questions. But the real power, the man from Denver, I only met him once. He came to the church late at night about 3 months ago. Told me that change was coming to Bridger's Hollow, whether we wanted it or not. That the railroad would transform this town into something prosperous. That anyone who stood in the way would be removed. His name. He called himself Governor. I don't know if that's a real name or a nickname or a title he gave himself, but he had the bearing of someone used to power, and he had connections. He knew things about me, about my past, things I've never told anyone in this town. Anna knelt so she was eye level with Hale, close enough to see the fear swimming in his eyes. What things, before I came to Bridger's Hollow, I was a different man. I did things I'm not proud of. This governor, he knew about all of it. He said if I cooperated, my past would stay buried. If I didn't, I would hang for crimes committed 20 years ago. So you helped them kill my husband? No? The word came out sharp and desperate. I warned Thomas. I begged him to leave. When he wouldn't, I stayed silent. That's my sin, Anna, not murder, cowardice. Anna stood looking down at the Reverend who had married her, who had buried her husband, who had chosen his own survival over justice. Where is the gold, Reverend, the real location, not what's on Thomas's map? Hale's eyes widened. How did you? Because Thomas was smart enough to create a false map in case someone found it. He would have hidden the real location somewhere, only I would think to look. But you know, don't you? You know because you helped him survey the land when we first arrived. You walked every acre with him. Hale's silence was confirmation. It's not under North Ridge, he said finally. It's in the caves beyond Eagle's Cliff, the ones the Shoshone used to use for winter shelter. Thomas found the vein by accident when he was tracking a wounded elk. Purest gold I've ever seen running through quartz like veins of light. And you told them. They already knew. Somehow they already knew. They just needed confirmation. Anna turned to leave, then paused. 4 days left, Reverend. 4 days until whatever they have planned. I suggest you pray that God is more forgiving than I am. She left him kneeling in the sunlight, a man who had traded his soul for survival and found the price too high after all. Outside the day had grown colder. Storm clouds were gathering over the mountains, promising snow before nightfall. Anna rode slowly through town, her mind working through everything Hale had told her. A man called Governor. Connections to Denver, knowledge of secrets that should have stayed buried. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the figure watching her from the alley beside the saloon. Almost, but 20 years of tracking had taught her to notice the wrongness in a scene, the detail that did not belong. She turned her horse and rode directly toward the alley. The figure tried to retreat deeper into shadow, but Anna was faster. She dismounted and followed on foot, her hand on the revolver at her hip. The alley ended in a dead end, and the watcher had nowhere left to run. He turned to face her, and Anna found herself looking at a boy, no more than 16, thin and scared, with the desperate eyes of someone caught doing something they knew was wrong. Who are you? Nobody. I'm nobody. Anna grabbed the front of his shirt and pushed him against the wall, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make the point. You were watching me. Why? They paid me to. Said to follow you, see where you went, who you talked to. That's all. I swear. Who paid you? The boy's eyes darted past her, looking for escape, finding none. I don't know his name. Big man, fancy clothes. He stays at the hotel room at the top of the stairs. Pays me $1 a day just to watch and report. What room? 7. But you can't go there. He's got men with him. Dangerous men. Anna released the boy and stepped back. Go home. Tell your mother you're sick. Don't leave your house for the next 4 days. Understand? The boy nodded frantically and ran as soon as she moved aside, disappearing into the street like smoke. Anna stood in the alley, thinking, Room 7 at the hotel, the man called Governor. This close after all this time. She checked her revolver, made sure it was loaded, and began walking toward the hotel with the steady pace of someone who had made a decision and would not be turned aside. The hotel lobby was empty except for the clerk, an old man who barely looked up from his newspaper as Anna climbed the stairs. The second-floor hallway was dim lit by a single window at the far end. Room 7 sat halfway down, its door closed, no sound coming from within. Anna knocked once. Footsteps. The door opened to reveal a man in his 50s, tall and well-dressed, just as Pemberton had described, with a gold ring on his right hand and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. His eyes took in Anna with the calm assessment of someone who had been expecting her. Mrs. Coulter, please come in. His voice was cultured Eastern, completely at odds with the rough frontier town around them. Anna hesitated, every instinct screaming danger, but she stepped inside anyway. The room was well appointed by local standards. A desk covered in papers, a bed that looked unused, and sitting in the chair by the window, smiling like he had won a game Anna had not known they were playing, was her son. Lucas stood as she entered, his face a mask of defiance and something else. Something that looked horribly like triumph. "Hello, Ma." The world tilted. Anna heard her own heartbeat loud in her ears, felt her lungs struggling to draw air. This was not possible. This was not real. Lucas would not, could not. The man called Governor closed the door behind her with a soft click. "I believe you two have some things to discuss." Anna found her voice, though it came out strangled. "Lucas, what have you done?" Her son looked at her with eyes that belonged to a stranger. "What I had to Ma. What you should have done months ago. I'm saving us." "Saving us? Margaret is dead. Your father is dead." "How is this saving anyone?" Lucas moved to the desk and picked up a document, holding it out to her. Anna did not take it. "It's a contract," he said, "for the sale of the ranch. $5,000 plus a percentage of the gold proceeds. Enough to set us up anywhere we want. Denver, San Francisco. Somewhere we can actually have a future instead of breaking our backs on land that's trying to kill us. Your father died protecting that land. My father died being stubborn. Just like you're being stubborn now. But I'm not going to let you get us both killed for pride." The man called Governor spoke from where he stood by the window, his voice smooth as silk. "Your son came to me 3 days ago, Mrs. Coulter, after he received the letter threatening his life. He's a smart young man. He understands that sometimes survival means compromise." Anna looked between them, understanding dawning like a sick sunrise. "You sent the letter. You threatened Lucas to make him turn against me. I gave him a choice, die with you or live without you. He chose life. I respect that." Anna's hand moved toward her gun, but Lucas was faster. He drew his father's revolver and pointed it at her. His hand steady, his eyes hard. "Don't, Ma, please. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. Sign the paper, take the money. Let's leave this place while we still can. Lower the gun, Lucas. Sign the paper." They stood frozen. Mother and son separated by more than the few feet between them, separated by choice and betrayal and the terrible mathematics of survival. The door burst open. Nathan Graves stood framed in the doorway, his own weapon drawn, his eyes taking in the scene instantly. "Step away from her, Lucas." Lucas swung his gun toward Nathan, and everything happened at once. Anna lunged for her son. The man called Governor Dove behind the desk. Nathan fired once, the bullet taking Lucas in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. Anna screamed and fell beside her son, her hands pressing against the wound that was bleeding too much, too fast. Lucas looked up at her with eyes that had gone from hard to scared to sorry in the space of a heartbeat. "Ma, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They said they would kill you if I didn't." "Shh, it's okay. You're okay." But he was not okay. She could feel his blood hot against her hands, could see his face going pale, could hear his breathing turn shallow and desperate. Nathan moved past them to check behind the desk, but the man called Governor was gone. A window stood open, cold air pouring through curtains, billowing like ghosts. "He's gone." Fire escape. Anna did not look up. She held her son and whispered promises she could not keep, that he would be fine, that everything would be fine, that she forgave him for choosing life over loyalty. Lucas's hand found hers, slick with blood, gripping tight. "The map. Pa's map. I gave it to them. I gave them everything. I'm so sorry. I don't care about the map. Stay with me, Lucas. Stay with me." But she could feel him slipping away, could feel the life leaving him with each weakening heartbeat. Nathan knelt beside her and pressed his neckerchief against the wound, but they both knew it was not enough. "We need to get him to a doctor." Anna looked up at Nathan with eyes that had gone beyond grief into some territory where feeling stopped and cold calculation began. "Go. Ride hard. Bring the doctor back. I'll keep pressure on it." Nathan hesitated only a moment before running from the room. Anna heard his boots thundering down the stairs, heard him shouting for a horse, heard the chaos spreading through the hotel as people realized something terrible had happened. She turned back to Lucas, whose eyes were fluttering closed. "No, look at me. Stay awake. Tell me where they are. Tell me where they have the real map, the real location of the gold." Lucas's lips moved, forming words she had to lean close to hear. "Caves, Eagle's Cliff. But Ma, it was never about the gold. They have something else planned. Something big, day 7. They said, day 7 everything changes." "What changes, Lucas? What changes?" Lucas's grip on her hand weakened, his eyes fluttering as consciousness slipped away. Anna pressed harder against the wound, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm, weak, irregular, but still there. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Lucas, stay with me." His breathing turned shallow and ragged, each breath a fight he was losing. Blood pooled beneath him, too much blood spreading across the hotel room floor in a dark mirror that reflected the lamplight. When Nathan returned moments later with Dr. Marsh, he found Anna still pressing against the wound, her hands crimson, her face blank, with the kind of shock that comes from watching someone you love slip toward death and being powerless to stop it. Marsh shouldered her aside gently but firmly, his experienced hands immediately assessing the damage. "He's alive," the doctor said, and Anna released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Barely. We need to move fast." She sat on the floor of a hotel room in a town that wanted her dead, covered in her son's blood, and felt something inside herself break so completely that she knew it would never be whole again. The ghost had died years ago, replaced by Anna Coulter, wife and mother, rancher and widow. But in that moment, holding her son's body, she felt the ghost claw her way back out of the grave where Anna had buried her. When Nathan returned with the doctor, he found Anna sitting perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Despite the blood, her eyes focused on something far beyond the walls of the room. "Mrs. Coulter, Anna, I'm so sorry." She looked at him with eyes that held no tears, no emotion, nothing but the cold arithmetic of revenge. How many days left? What? How many days until day 7? Nathan checked his pocket watch. 4. We have 4 days. Anna stood, leaving her son's body on the floor, stepping over his blood without looking down. She walked to the window where the man called Governor had escaped and looked out at Bridger's Hollow, spread below her like a map. "Then we have 4 days to kill everyone responsible for this, starting now." She turned to face Nathan, and what he saw in her face made him take an involuntary step backward. This was not grief. This was not madness. This was something colder and more terrible. This was purpose distilled to its purest form. "I'm going to the caves. I'm going to find the gold, and I'm going to use it as bait to draw them out, all of them. Watson Hale, this governor, whoever else is involved. I'm going to make them come to me on ground I choose, and then I'm going to end this." "Anna, you can't. Not alone, not like this." She looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I was never going to do this alone, Nathan. I was always going to do it as the ghost. The woman Thomas married is dead. She died with her son. What's left is what I was before. A tracker, a hunter, a killer." She walked past him toward the door, and he caught her arm. She looked at his hand on her, then up at his face. "Let me help you." "You can't help me, not with what I'm about to do. Try me." Anna studied him for a long moment, measuring something in his eyes, finding whatever she was looking for. "Then keep up." She left the room, left her son's body, left behind the last remnants of the woman she had been trying to be for 12 years. Behind her, Nathan Graves checked his weapons and said a prayer for the souls of the men they were about to kill, because he knew with absolute certainty that Anna Coulter would offer no mercy. The reckoning had begun, and before it ended, Bridger's Hollow would learn what happened when you took everything from someone who had nothing left to lose. 4 days until the earth stood still. 4 days until the ghost reminded them all why she had earned that name. 4 days until blood paid for blood in a currency that could never be repaid. The sun set on the 3rd day, painting the snow red as blood, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, Anna Coulter began to hunt. The doctor's hands moved with practiced efficiency, but his face told a different story. Anna watched from across the room, her own hands still sticky with her son's blood, as Dr. Henry Marsh worked over Lucas's unconscious body. Nathan stood beside her, close enough to catch her, if she fell far enough to give her space to break if she needed to. She did not break. "The bullet went clean through," Marsh said without looking up, his fingers probing the wound with gentle precision. "Missed the lung by half an inch. He's lost blood, but he's young and strong. If infection doesn't set in, he'll live." The words should have brought relief. Instead, Anna felt only a cold numbness spreading through her chest like frost across a window. Her son had betrayed her, had sold her to men who wanted her dead. had pointed a gun at her, and would have pulled the trigger if Nathan had not fired first. That Lucas might live changed nothing about what he had done. How long until he wakes? Hours? Maybe tomorrow. His body needs rest to heal. How long until he can travel? Anna asked, her voice hollow. Marsh looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Travel, Mrs. Coulter. Your son has a bullet wound through his shoulder. He's lost enough blood to kill most men. He needs at least a week of bed rest, probably 2. We don't have 2 weeks. We have 3 days. Nathan stepped forward. Anna, he can't. I know. She cut him off. Her eyes never left Lucas's pale face. But they won't wait. Governor knows we're coming for him. If we delay, he'll either run or bring an army. This ends in 3 days, whether Lucas is ready or not. She turned to Marsh. Do what you can. Keep him alive for 72 hours. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. Anna turned away from the bed where Lucas lay, pale and still, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She walked to the window and looked out at Bridger's Hollow as the sun sank behind the western mountains, painting everything in shades of red and gold that reminded her of fire. 4 days left. That night, long after Anna and Nathan had left to plan downstairs, Lucas lay alone in the darkness and stared at the ceiling. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of what he'd done, what he'd become. He could still feel it. The weight of the gun in his hand, the moment he'd pointed it at his mother, the look in her eyes, not fear, but something worse. Disappointment. Betrayal mixed with understanding, and somehow that was more painful than hatred would have been. He'd thought he was protecting her. Governor had shown him the photographs, made him watch as they beat his father, made him understand exactly what would happen to Anna if Lucas didn't cooperate. They'd broken something inside him that day in that Denver office, something fundamental that made him capable of drawing on the woman who'd raised him. But betraying her to save her, that was the coward's mathematics. The same twisted logic that had gotten his father killed. Thomas Coulter had never chosen the safe path, had never traded honor for survival, had died rather than compromise. And what had Lucas done? At the first real test of his character, he'd folded, chosen life over loyalty, become exactly what his father had spent 21 years teaching him not to be. The shame of it was a physical weight on his chest, heavier than the pain in his shoulder. Lucas pushed himself upright with his good arm, ignoring the white-hot lance of pain that shot through his damaged shoulder. His left arm was nearly useless, now the muscles torn, but his right hand was steady. He could still shoot, could still fight, could still try to become the man his father had wanted him to be, even if it killed him, especially if it killed him. He began the slow, agonizing process of getting dressed, each movement a small war against his body's protests. By the time he'd pulled on his boots, he was sweating and dizzy. By the time he'd strapped on his gun belt, he'd torn open the wound enough that fresh blood seeped through the bandages. He didn't care. Some debts could only be paid in blood: his father's death, his mother's pain, his own cowardice. Lucas Coulter walked to the window and looked out at the mountains, where in 3 days everything would end. One way or another, he would make this right, or die trying. Nathan came to stand beside her, his voice quiet. You should rest. You've been awake for 2 days straight. I'll rest when this is finished. Anna, don't. The word came out harder than she intended. Don't tell me everything will be fine. Don't tell me Lucas didn't mean it. Don't tell me any of the comfortable lies people tell themselves to make betrayal easier to swallow. Nathan was silent for a moment, then spoke with an honesty that cut deeper than comfort would have. I was going to say that what you're feeling is justified, that rage and grief are appropriate responses to what's happened, and that when you're ready to use those feelings, I'll be there to make sure you don't face them alone. Anna looked at him, really looked, seeing past the badge and the careful distance he maintained. She saw a man who had ridden into a hostile town for a debt to a dead friend and stayed for something else, something that looked like duty but felt more personal. Why? She asked. Why are you still here? Thomas is dead. You've paid whatever debt you owed him. You could leave, should leave. Nathan met her gaze without flinching. Because I've spent my whole life being too late to help people who needed me, too late to save them, too late to make things right. Just once I'd like to be on time. The words hung between them honest and raw, stripped of pretense. Anna felt something shift inside her, some small crack in the ice that had formed around her heart. Before she could respond, Dr. Marsh cleared his throat. "I need to change his bandages. You should both get some air. Come back in an hour." Anna nodded and left the room without looking back at her son. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, exhaustion finally catching up with grief. Nathan's hand found hers in the darkness behind her eyelids. She did not pull away. They walked through Bridger's Hollow as evening fell, neither speaking, both hyper-aware of the eyes watching from windows and doorways. News of the shooting had spread through town like wildfire. Anna Coulter's son had been shot by a federal marshal in the hotel. Some said Lucas had attacked his mother. Others claimed he was defending her. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in the complicated space between. Nathan led her to the edge of town, where buildings gave way to open land, and the mountains rose like dark sentinels against the deepening sky. They stood at the boundary between civilization and wilderness, and Anna felt more at home in the wild than she had felt in town for months. "Tell me about the caves," Nathan said. "The ones Hale mentioned." Anna's mind shifted into the practical mode that had kept her alive through the Apache Wars. Emotion could wait, strategy could not. Eagle's Cliff is about 6 miles north of here. The Shoshone used the caves there for winter shelter before the whites came. There's a network of tunnels that runs deep into the mountain. Thomas and I explored them when we first arrived, mapping them in case we ever needed shelter during a blizzard. And that's where the gold is. If Hale was telling the truth, yes. But the caves are also a perfect place for an ambush, multiple entrances, lots of places to hide, easy to defend. Nathan smiled grimly. "Then it's a good thing we're not walking in blind." Anna looked at him with new appreciation. "You have a plan? I have the beginning of one. We know they want the gold. We know they're willing to kill for it. So we give them what they want, but on our terms. We use the gold as bait and the caves as the trap. And when they come for it," Nathan's hand moved to his gun, an unconscious gesture that told Anna everything she needed to know about what he was prepared to do, "then we make sure they never threaten anyone in this town again." They were still standing there planning violence under the stars when the sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. Sheriff Marcus Watson rode toward them at a leisurely pace, his bulk silhouetted against the last light of day. He stopped his horse 10 feet away and dismounted with the careful movements of a large man aware of his own weight. "Mrs. Coulter, Marshal Graves, out for an evening stroll." Anna's hand moved to her gun, but Nathan touched her arm lightly. "Not yet." "Just getting some air, Sheriff. Is there a problem?" Watson smiled, and the smile held no warmth. "Heard there was some trouble at the hotel. Your boy got shot." "Anna, that must be hard for you." "Is there something you wanted, Sheriff? Or did you ride out here just to gloat?" Watson's smile faded. "I came to deliver a message from the people you're working so hard to fight. They say they're willing to be reasonable, willing to forget everything that's happened if you just sign the papers and leave. Lucas can heal up, you can take your money, and everybody goes home happy. Everybody except the people who are already dead. Margaret made her choice. Lucas made his. Thomas made his. You're the only one left who can still choose to live." Anna stepped forward, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Tell your masters that I've made my choice. Tell them that in 4 days this ends, one way or another. Tell them the ghost is coming, and she remembers every face, every name, every person who thought they could take what wasn't theirs." Watson's hand moved toward his gun, but Nathan was faster. His weapon cleared leather and leveled at Watson's chest before the sheriff's fingers touched metal. "I wouldn't," Nathan said quietly. "Federal marshal trumps local sheriff, and I'd hate to have to file the paperwork explaining why I shot you." Watson froze, calculating odds, finding them unfavorable. He raised his hand slowly and backed toward his horse. 4 days, Anna. Then the railroad comes through whether you're here or not. They'll build around your graves if they have to." He mounted and rode away, leaving Anna and Nathan standing in the gathering darkness. "He's scared," Nathan observed. That threat was to convince himself as much as us. Anna nodded. "Then we're on the right track. Scared men make mistakes." They returned to the hotel to find Lucas awake and Dr. Marsh packing his instruments. Her son looked at her with eyes that held pain and shame in equal measure. "Ma—" Anna held up a hand, stopping whatever apology or explanation he had prepared. "Not now. Right now you rest and heal. When this is over, we'll talk about what you did and why. Until then, I need you to tell me everything you told them. Every detail about the land, the gold hour plans. Everything." Lucas's face crumpled, but he nodded and began to speak. For the next hour, Anna listened as her son laid out his betrayal, piece by piece. How the man called governor had approached him 2 weeks ago with promises of wealth and safety. How they had threatened to kill Anna if Lucas didn't cooperate. How they had shown him proof of what they'd done to Thomas, photographs that made clear his father's death had been no accident. "They have pictures," Lucas said, his voice breaking, "of Pa, of what they did to him before they pushed him off the cliff. They said if I didn't help them, they'd do worse to you, make you suffer. I couldn't let that happen." Anna felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Where are these photographs? Governor has them. Keeps them in a leather case he carries everywhere. Uses them to control people. Shows them what happens to those who resist." Nathan and Anna exchanged glances. Physical evidence of Thomas's murder would be enough to bring down everyone involved, if they could get the case. "What else did you tell them?" Lucas looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "Everything. About the false map Pa made. About how you knew the real location. About your past as a tracker. They know who you really are, Ma. They know about the ghost." The revelation should have frightened her. Instead, Anna felt a strange sense of relief. No more pretending. No more hiding behind the mask of a simple rancher's widow. If they knew who she was, then she could be who she was. "Good," she said quietly. "Let them know. Let them be afraid." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You made your choice, Lucas. You chose life over loyalty, safety over family. I understand why. I might even forgive you someday, but right now I need you to understand something. The woman who raised you, the mother you knew, she died today in this room. What's left is something different, something harder. When this is over, we'll see if there's anything left that remembers how to be soft." She left before he could respond, before she could see the tears that were already falling down her son's face. In the hallway, Nathan caught up with her. "That was harsh. That was honest. He needs to understand what he cost us, what he cost me. He's your son. He was my son. Now I don't know what he is." They descended the stairs in silence and stepped out into the night where the temperature had dropped below freezing and the first snowflakes were beginning to fall. Winter was coming early this year, as if the land itself sensed the violence brewing and was preparing to bury the evidence under white silence. Anna looked up at the falling snow and made a decision. We leave at first light. Ride to Eagle's Cliff, find the gold, set the trap. 3 days left means we can't afford to wait. What about Lucas? Dr. Marsh will look after him. If we succeed, Lucas gets to live with what he did. If we fail, it won't matter anyway. Nathan started to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He'd learned enough about Anna Coulter to know when her mind was set. "I'll get supplies, rope, lanterns, ammunition. We'll need to be ready for anything." Anna nodded and walked toward the stable where her horse waited. Behind her, Bridger's Hollow settled into an uneasy sleep, unaware that in 3 days everything would change. She spent the night preparing in ways that had nothing to do with supplies. In her room at the boarding house, she laid out weapons and checked them methodically. 2 revolvers, freshly cleaned and loaded. A rifle with a scope that Thomas had given her on their 5th anniversary. A knife with a blade sharp enough to split paper. And tucked in her boot, a smaller knife, the one she'd carried during the Apache campaigns, the one that had saved her life more times than she could count. When everything was ready, she sat by the window and watched the snow fall, her mind empty of everything except the cold mathematics of survival. She did not think about Lucas or Thomas or the life she'd built and lost. She thought only about terrain and timing, about angles of approach and fields of fire, about the 100 small details that would determine who lived and who died when the final confrontation came. Somewhere in that long night, Nathan knocked on her door. She let him in without speaking, and they sat together in the darkness, 2 people who had seen too much death, preparing to see more. "Are you scared?" he asked. "No." "Liar." Anna smiled despite herself. Terrified. But fear is just information. It tells you what matters, what you have to lose. I've already lost everything that mattered. What's left to be afraid of? Nathan took her hand, and this time she gripped back, needing the anchor of human contact even as she prepared to do inhuman things. You haven't lost everything. You're still here, still fighting. Fighting is all I know how to do. When the fighting stops, I don't know what's left. Maybe we find out together. The words hung in the air between them, a promise or a possibility, or just a moment of connection before the violence came. Anna squeezed his hand once, then let go. After. We talk about after when there is an after. Nathan nodded and stood to leave. At the door he paused. The ghost. That's what they called you during the Apache Wars. You know what they call you in Bridger's Hollow now? What, the widow? Like that's all you are, all you can be. But I've seen you these past few days. You're not a widow, you're not a ghost, you're something else entirely. Something they should have been afraid of from the beginning. He left, and Anna sat alone with his words turning them over like coins in her hand. Widow, ghost, woman, mother, killer. All the names she'd worn like costumes, none of them quite fitting the truth of who she was. By the time dawn broke, she had stopped trying to define herself. Definitions could wait. Right now there was only the work. They rode out as the sun climbed over the eastern peaks, painting the new snow in shades of pink and gold. Nathan had procured everything they needed, packing it efficiently onto a spare horse. They moved at a steady pace, not hurrying, conserving energy for what lay ahead. The land changed as they traveled north, the gentle slopes giving way to steeper terrain, the scattered trees becoming dense forest. Eagle's Cliff rose ahead of them, a wall of stone that jutted from the mountainside like a broken tooth. At its base, hidden by brush and shadow, were the caves. They reached the entrance at midday and dismounted, tying the horses in a sheltered spot with enough grass and water to last several days. Anna stood at the mouth of the largest cave, breathing in the smell of stone and ancient smoke, remembering the last time she'd been here with Thomas, mapping passages and laughing at how their voices echoed in the darkness. That felt like another lifetime, another person's memory. Stay close, she said to Nathan. The main tunnel splits 3 ways about 50 yards in. 2 of them are dead ends. The third leads to a chamber where the Shoshone used to hold ceremonies. If the gold is here, that's where it'll be. They lit lanterns and entered the darkness. The tunnel narrowed quickly, forcing them to walk single file. Anna led the way, her memory of the layout coming back in fragments. Left here. Watch for the low ceiling. Step over the crack that went down to nothing. The split came exactly where she remembered. She took the right-hand path without hesitation, and Nathan followed without question. The tunnel opened up after another 100 feet, widening into a natural chamber, perhaps 30 feet across. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone icicles, and in the center of the room, reflecting their lantern light in flashes of yellow fire, was the gold. It wasn't a vein, it was a deposit, a concentration of ore so pure it looked like sunlight solidified running through the quartz matrix in thick ribbons that crisscrossed the chamber floor. Anna knelt and touched it, feeling the cold metal under her fingers, understanding finally what men were willing to kill for. Mother of God, Nathan breathed. There must be thousands of dollars worth here, maybe tens of thousands. Enough to buy a railroad, enough to build an empire, enough to make good men do terrible things. Anna stood and surveyed the chamber with a tactical eye. One entrance, no other way out. High ceiling, good acoustics. Anyone who entered would be silhouetted against the tunnel entrance, easy targets. This is where we make our stand. They spent the afternoon preparing. Nathan rigged a series of tripwires at the tunnel entrance, nothing lethal but enough to slow anyone coming through and warn of their approach. Anna positioned lanterns at strategic points, creating pools of light and shadow that would confuse depth perception. They stacked stones to create cover and sighted firing positions from multiple angles. When everything was ready, they sat together in the golden chamber and ate cold rations, neither speaking, both conserving energy for what was coming. "They'll send someone to scout first," Nathan said. "Watson, probably. Test our defenses, see if we're really here. Let him come. We'll send him back with a message." "What message?" Anna checked her revolver for the 10th time, a habit born of too many close calls. That we're ready, that we're waiting, that anyone who wants this gold will have to come through us to get it. They didn't have to wait long. As the sun began its descent, throwing long shadows across the snow outside, they heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses moving at a steady pace toward the cliff. Anna and Nathan extinguished all but one lantern and took their positions. Anna crouched behind a natural rock formation that gave her a clear view of the tunnel entrance. Nathan positioned himself on the opposite side, creating a crossfire. The hoofbeats stopped. Voices echoed faintly from outside, too distorted to make out words. Then, footsteps careful and deliberate entering the tunnel. Sheriff Marcus Watson appeared at the chamber entrance, his bulk blocking most of the light. He held a lantern in one hand and a gun in the other, sweeping both around the chamber until he found what he was looking for. The gold. "Well, I'll be damned," he said to himself. "It's real. Step into the chamber, Sheriff, slowly." Watson froze at the sound of Anna's voice coming from the darkness. He raised his lantern higher, trying to spot her, but Anna had chosen her position well. "Mrs. Coulter, I thought you might be here." "Just you, or did you bring friends?" Watson smiled, and even from across the chamber, Anna could see it was not a friendly expression. "Oh, I brought friends. Reverend Hale is outside, and Governor. They're very interested in having a conversation with you. About the gold, about a lot of things. About how this doesn't have to end badly for everyone. About how we can all walk away from this if you're reasonable." Nathan's voice echoed from the other side of the chamber. "Reasonable like Margaret Yates, like Thomas Coulter." Watson's gun swung toward the sound, but he held his fire. "Marshal Graves, didn't see you there. This is getting complicated." "It got complicated when you started murdering people," Nathan said. "Now it's simple. You're all under arrest for conspiracy murder and about a dozen other charges I'll think up on the ride back to Denver." Watson laughed, a sound like grinding gravel. "You think you're arresting anyone? You're trapped in a cave with one entrance. We've got 6 men outside and all the time in the world. You'll run out of food and water long before we run out of patience." Anna stood stepping into the lamplight so Watson could see her clearly. She held her revolver at her side, not pointing it but making clear it was ready. "Here's what's going to happen, Sheriff. You're going to deliver a message to Governor and Hale. Tell them they have until dawn tomorrow to surrender themselves to Marshal Graves. Tell them to bring the leather case with the photographs of Thomas. Tell them if they comply, they'll face trial in Denver. If they don't, they won't face anything ever again." Watson stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "That's your offer. After everything, you think they're just going to give up?" "I think they're going to weigh their options. Death in a cave or a trial they might survive. Men like that, they always choose the chance to talk their way out. And if they don't," Anna's smile was colder than the snow outside, "then I come for them, and when I do, I won't be aiming to arrest anyone." Watson seemed to consider this. Then he holstered his gun and backed slowly toward the tunnel entrance. "I'll deliver your message. But Anna, you should know something. Governor, he's not what you think. He's got resources you can't imagine, friends in places you can't reach. You kill him, you won't just have Bridger's Hollow after you, you'll have the whole territory. I've been hunted before, Sheriff. I'm still here. Can't say the same for all the people who came after me." Watson disappeared into the tunnel, and they listened to his footsteps fade into silence. Nathan emerged from his position. "They won't surrender. You know that." "I know, but now they'll spend the night arguing about it, second-guessing wearing each other down. Fear is a weapon, too, sometimes more effective than bullets." They settled in for a long night, taking turns keeping watch while the other rested. Anna found she could not sleep despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept circling back to Lucas lying in a hotel bed recovering from a wound that should have killed him, to Thomas, whose murder might finally be avenged, to the life she'd built and lost and could never reclaim. Nathan woke from his rest period to find her staring at the gold, her expression distant. "Thinking about what you'll do with it if we survive, thinking about what Thomas would do, whether he'd be proud or ashamed of what I've become." Nathan sat beside her, their shoulders touching in the cold darkness. "He'd be proud. You're protecting what's yours, fighting for justice. That's what he would have wanted. Is it, or would he have wanted me to take Lucas and run, to value life over land, family, over revenge? Maybe both. Maybe he'd want you to survive but not forget, To live but not forgive. Anna leaned against him, exhaustion finally catching up with determination. I'm so tired, Nathan. Tired of being strong. Tired of fighting. Tired of being alone. You're not alone. She looked up at him, and in the dim lantern light, she saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Not pity, not duty, something warmer and more dangerous. Don't, she whispered. Don't look at me like that. Not now. Not when everything is broken. When then? After the fighting, after the dying. There might not be an after Anna. There might only be now. He cupped her face in his hand, rough and gentle at once, and Anna felt something crack inside her. Not break, crack, letting light through. When he kissed her, it tasted like goodbye and hello, mixed together like ending and beginning, like the complicated truth that sometimes you could grieve one thing and want another at the same time. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Anna rested her forehead against his. If we live through this, we'll live through this, and then we'll figure out what comes next, together. The word settled into Anna's chest like a stone, heavy and solid and real. Together. After so many months of alone, the possibility of together felt like a gift she didn't know how to accept. Dawn came cold and clear, the sun rising over mountains that held their breath. Anna and Nathan stood at the cave entrance, watching the snow-covered clearing where 6 men on horses waited. Sheriff Watson, Reverend Hale. And in the center, mounted on a black horse, a man Anna had never seen before, but knew instantly must be Governor. He was tall and well-dressed, as described, but what struck her was his face. Handsome in a refined way, with the bearing of someone born to power and comfortable wielding it. He held a leather case in his lap, and even from a distance, Anna could see him smiling. "Mrs. Coulter," he called out, his voice carrying across the snow. "Marshal Graves, I received your message. I'm afraid I must decline your generous offer of surrender." "Then you've made your choice," Anna called back. Governor's smile widened. "Actually, I have a counteroffer. Lower your weapons, come out peacefully, and I'll let you both live. You can take your wounded son and leave Montana. Go anywhere you like. I'll even give you enough money to start over. And the gold stays with me, as does the land, as does everything Thomas Coulter thought was his." Anna felt Nathan tense beside her, but she touched his arm lightly. "Not yet. You killed him, Thomas. You had him beaten and thrown off that cliff." Governor's smile never wavered. "I did what was necessary. Your husband was a stubborn man. He could have sold for a fair price. Instead, he chose to be an obstacle. Obstacles get removed. Show me the photographs." Governor opened the leather case and held up a photograph too distant for Anna to see details, but close enough to confirm it existed. "These, yes, I have proof. Every moment of Thomas Coulter's last hours, documented for posterity. Would you like to know exactly how he died?" Something inside Anna went very cold and very quiet. "Yes." Governor seemed surprised by the simple answer. He dismounted and began walking toward the cave entrance, the photograph in his hand, his men covering him from behind. He stopped 10 feet from Anna, close enough to see her eyes, and held out the photograph. Anna looked. She saw Thomas beaten and bleeding, tied to a post. She saw the fear in his eyes and the defiance. She saw the moment before they killed him, preserved forever in silver and shadow. And she saw something else, something in the background, a detail Governor had missed. A reflection in a window. A face. Lucas. Her son had been there, had witnessed Thomas's murder, had seen everything and said nothing. The realization hit her like a physical blow. All this time she'd thought Lucas had betrayed her out of fear or greed. But he'd betrayed her because he'd been traumatized, broken by watching his father die, manipulated by monsters who knew exactly how to use that trauma. Governor watched her face change and misread the emotion there. "Now you understand. Now you see what happens to those who resist. So I'll ask one more time. Surrender or die?" Anna looked up from the photograph, her eyes dry, her voice steady. "There's a third option you haven't considered, which is that I turn your offer around. You surrender to me right now, or I kill everyone you brought with you, starting with you." Governor laughed, genuinely amused. "You and one marshal against 6 armed men. Those are terrible odds, Mrs. Coulter. For you, maybe. The gunshot came from behind Governor, taking down one of his men before anyone could react. Everyone dove for cover as a second shot echoed across the clearing. Anna and Nathan used the confusion to retreat into the cave, and Governor scrambled back toward his horse, screaming orders. "Who's shooting?" "Where are they?" The answer came from the ridge above. A rifle cracked and one of Governor's men dropped. Everyone's head snapped toward the sound. There, braced against a boulder for support, stood Lucas Coulter. His face was gray with pain and exhaustion. His left arm hung useless at his side, fresh blood soaking through the bandage. He'd torn open the wound riding here, maybe permanently damaged something the doctor could have saved. But his right hand was steady on the rifle, and his eyes, when they met Anna's across the snowy clearing, held nothing but grim determination. "Nobody," Lucas said, his voice carrying across the snow, "nobody touches my mother." He fired again, and Governor's men scattered for cover. "Nobody touches my mother," he said, his voice carrying across the snow. "Nobody." Anna felt her heart stop. Her son, who should have been recovering in a hotel bed, had followed them, had come to help despite everything that had happened, despite the wound, despite the betrayal. Governor's remaining men opened fire on Lucas, who dove behind cover. Nathan and Anna laid down suppressing fire from the cave mouth, creating a crossfire that pinned the attackers. In the chaos, Governor ran not toward his horse, but into the cave, seeking shelter from the gunfight. He sprinted down the tunnel toward the gold chamber, and Anna went after him, leaving Nathan to cover Lucas. She caught up with him in the golden chamber, where he stood with his back against the far wall, breathing hard, the leather case still clutched in his hand. "It's over," Anna said, her gun leveled at his chest. "Drop the case. Get on your knees." Governor smiled, and the smile held genuine amusement. "You still don't understand, do you? Who I am, what I can do to you. I know you're a killer. I know you murdered my husband. That's all I need to know. Your husband was a thief. He stole this land through a fraudulent homestead claim. The gold was never his to find. It belonged to the territory, which means it belonged to me. You're not the territorial governor. No, but I own him. I own the judges, the marshals, half the legislators in Denver. This cave, this gold, this whole territory is mine by right of power. And you're just a widow who doesn't know when she's beaten." Anna took a step closer. "I'm not a widow. I'm a ghost. And ghosts don't stay beaten," she fired. The bullet took Governor in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the cave wall. The leather case fell from his hands, spilling photographs across the stone floor. Anna walked forward and kicked his gun away, standing over him as he clutched his wounded shoulder. "You're going to trial. You're going to answer for everything you've done. And those photographs are going to make sure you hang." Governor looked up at her with eyes that held no fear, only calculation. "You think this ends anything? Kill me, arrest me, it doesn't matter. There are a dozen men like me waiting to take my place. The railroad is coming. Progress is coming. Nothing you do will stop it. Maybe not, but I can make sure you don't profit from it." She gathered the photographs and the case, tucking them securely into her coat. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Either Nathan and Lucas had won, or they'd lost. Anna helped Governor to his feet and marched him toward the tunnel entrance at gunpoint. They emerged to find the clearing quiet. 3 of Governor's men lay dead in the snow. 2 had fled on horseback. Sheriff Watson knelt with his hands behind his head, Nathan's gun pressed to his skull. Reverend Hale sat nearby, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And Lucas stood alone, his rifle lowered, blood seeping through his shirt from where his wound had reopened, but alive and standing and looking at his mother with eyes that begged for forgiveness. Anna pushed Governor toward Nathan. "Arrest him. Murder, conspiracy, corruption. Federal charges." Nathan secured Governor with rope while Anna walked to her son. They stood facing each other, 2 people separated by betrayal and blood and love that wouldn't quite die. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "I saw them kill Pa. I saw everything. I was hunting that day, came back early, and I saw. They said if I told anyone they'd kill you. They said if I helped you, they'd make you suffer. So I helped them instead. I thought I was protecting you." Anna reached out and touched her son's face, feeling tears she had not known were falling, streak down her own cheeks. "I know, I understand. and someday I might even forgive you, but right now you need to get back to the doctor before you bleed to death." Lucas nodded and allowed Nathan to help him onto a horse. They rode back to Bridger's Hollow together, victorious and broken, carrying prisoners and gold and wounds that might never fully heal. 3 months later, Anna stood on the porch of her ranch house, watching spring green creep across the winter brown fields. Governor, whose real name turned out to be Jonathan Blackwell, a disgraced former territorial senator, had been tried and convicted on 14 counts, including murder, conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. The photographs from his leather case had sealed his fate, each image a documented step in Thomas Coulter's final hours. The jury had deliberated for less than an hour. The judge had shown no mercy. 20 years in territorial prison, hard labor, no possibility of early release. Sheriff Marcus Watson, faced with overwhelming evidence and the sudden absence of the powerful patron who'd protected him, had crumbled like wet paper. He'd turned state's evidence against Blackwell in exchange for leniency, spending 3 days on the witness stand, detailing every order he'd followed, every crime he'd committed, every person he'd intimidated or worse. During his testimony, Watson had wept openly, claiming he'd been coerced, threatened, manipulated into service. The judge had been unmoved by the tears but practical about the testimony. Watson's cooperation had helped close a dozen unsolved cases across the territory. He received 10 years to be served in Denver, far from the town he'd corrupted. Reverend Josiah Hale had been arrested as an accessory to murder, but had also provided crucial testimony. His detailed knowledge of the conspiracy, his confirmation of Thomas's warnings, his documentation of Blackwell's threats, all of it had helped build an airtight case. The prosecutor had argued for mercy given his cooperation. The defense had pointed out that Hale's silence had cost lives. In the end, the judge had split the difference, 5 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Anna had attended all 3 trials, sitting in the front row, her face expressionless as the men who'd destroyed her family were paraded before the court. When Hale had been led away in shackles, he'd tried to speak to her, his eyes pleading for something, understanding, forgiveness, acknowledgement that he'd tried to warn Thomas even if he'd been too weak to do more. She'd turned away without a word. Some betrayals lived beyond forgiveness. The railroad had come through after all, but on a route that skirted Coulter property rather than crossing it. The gold remained in the caves untouched, a resource Anna had decided to leave for Lucas when she was gone, because she was leaving. Nathan stood beside her 2 saddled horses waiting in the yard. They were riding to Denver, where he would return to his duties, and she would decide what came next. Lucas had chosen to stay and work the ranch to make peace with the land and the ghosts that haunted it. "You don't have to go," Lucas said from the doorway, his shoulder healed, but his eyes still carrying shadows. "This is your home." Anna smiled at her son, feeling love and loss tangled together. "It was my home. Now it's yours. Make it into something good, something that would make your father proud." She mounted her horse and Nathan mounted his. They rode away from the ranch as the sun climbed higher, leaving Lucas standing on the porch waving goodbye. On the road to Denver, Nathan finally asked the question Anna had been expecting. "What happens now, with us?" Anna looked at him, this man who had ridden into her life at its darkest moment and chosen to stay through all the violence and grief. "I don't know. I'm not ready to be anyone's wife again. Maybe I never will be, but I'm ready to not be alone. That's enough. That's more than enough." They rode together through a landscape slowly waking from winter, 2 people who had survived when they shouldn't have, carrying scars and secrets and the fragile possibility that sometimes the end of one life could be the beginning of another. Behind them, Bridger's Hollow grew smaller in the distance, a town that had learned the hard way what happened when you underestimated a widow, or a ghost, or a woman who was both and neither and something else entirely. The earth had stood still. The reckoning had come and gone. And Anna Coulter, who had been wife and mother and widow and warrior, rode toward a future she could not see but was finally ready to face. Not whole, not healed, but alive. And sometimes in the hard country where winter lasted 8 months and spring came grudging and brief, alive was all you could ask for. It was enough. The end.